Welcome, everybody. This is the RO Sports Show's Raider Wrap-Up Show. I am your host, Matt Harrelson. Alongside with me, Lady Raiders basketball coach, Teddy Mosley. Teddy, we really appreciate you joining us. So what we're trying to do with this show, we had head coach Brian Till on last week. As I was mentioning to you, this is kind of your one-stop shop for all thing Richmond Raiders sports. So since football season over, we said, there's plenty of other sports at Richmond, so we wanted to start here with the Lady Raiders basketball team. So this is your first year as the head coach for the Lady Raiders. How's that going?
It's going well. It's an adventure. We're young, going from coaching boys to girls. It's a little bit of a different experience, but so far it's one that I've enjoyed a whole lot.
All right, so coming into the season, I know you guys have already played a few games. You're 4-4 overall, but what were some of your team's goals coming into the season, and how much further do you guys need to go to accomplish some of those?
Well, our main goal is just to get better. That's our main goal. Some of the things that we're trying to get accomplished this year. We're a young team. Last year they were 6-15. This year we're 4-4.
Mm-hmm.
So we obviously want to improve on that. I think not having the girls over the summer, and a lot of my core players played volleyball, so which I didn't get a lot of time with them. But we're getting better. We are young team, scrappy. We're young. So.
All right. So I don't know if system is the right word for it, but on offense, what are you guys trying to do this season?
We're trying to cause as much havoc as we can on offense. Our defense is what really leads to our offense. We want to press the whole game. We don't have a lot of size, but we have a lot of speed. So we want to take advantage of that. Our guards are really fast. We force a lot of turnovers. We're committing a lot of turnovers, but we've got to score off the turnovers that we're committing. The past two games, we are shooting 112 for 121 from the 21 for 121 from the field. So we just got to put the ball in the hole.
That's a lot of taking a lot of practice shots at the stripe there after practice,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Now, as you mentioned, you guys were 6-15 overall last year, 6th in the SAC with a 3-11 record. So, what do you guys need to start doing, continue to do to make sure you guys have a better record this year?
Well, one thing we have to do is take care of the ball. That's the very first thing we got to do. Like I said, we have a young team. We got a freshman starter at the point guard, and she's making a big jump from playing against 11, 12-year-olds or 12 and 13-year-olds to playing against 17 and 18-year-olds. So that's a 5-year jump for her, for Aaliyah Sweeney. It's been a struggle so far, but I wanted her to get in early to get, go ahead and get her lumps because, the ball's in her hand.
Right.
So we're a young team, like I said. And then we got Jayla McDougal, who's also a sophomore, who plays a very, big role in our backcourt, and several other players. Alexis Sweeney, her sister, as well. So.
All right, so let's jump into that real quick. So, how many players did you lose from last year graduating?
I think they lost. With this being my first year, I
Right.
think it was 4 or 5 players.
So as you mentioned, this is a primarily sophomore class, junior class?
Sophomore, fresh. I've got 2 freshmen. Jemiah Rattler from Hamlet. So sophomores and juniors. A few seniors. So I got 1 senior starter, Talia Wall. So.
Okay. So I know that you mentioned in a story with the RO that you guys aren't just necessarily trying to get to 500. Y'all are also trying to win a conference championship in the long run, right?
Of course we are. That's our goal. We have the talent to do it. And we went into Pinecrest last Friday night, and, they haven't lost a conference game in 2 years. And, they've got juniors and seniors, and we got sophomores and freshmen, and we stood toe-to-toe with them. We were right there, right on the cusp. And I think we put a little fear in their heart. And things just didn't go our way. I think they kind of know they got lucky and won out, but they got to come back to Richmond.
All right, that's right. So looking at the season so far, what are some of the Lady Raiders' strengths, and then what are also some of you guys' weaknesses this year?
I'll start the weaknesses first. I think our weakness right now is just our youth. Trying to teach, having to teach stuff, a lot of different things. Trying to break some habits and stuff like that, But I think our youthfulness is our weakness. It's a strength as well, but I think just our youthfulness and inexperience at the varsity level, because it's a fast game. Even to me as a coach, the game is so fast. Sometimes I have to kind of slow myself down.
Speaking of that, and I want to get the strengths from you as well, but you're talking about the speed of the game. I know we've seen it at the top level at the NBA, and it's starting to move down. Is that type of game started to reach the high school level now?
Oh, of course. I mean, it definitely is, because you look at a lot of teams now. the traditional basketball team has a power forward and a center.
Right.
You know, it's even moving to the high school game. Now you have the stretch four. You know, the post game is really one that's starting to diminish in the game of basketball. You know, so also with that, you know, more athleticism coming along as far as with rebounding and stuff like that, and that's where you got to teach boxing out and things of that nature. So a lot of the fundamentals are starting to go away, so it's being replaced with athleticism. So.
Okay. So youthfulness being one of the weaknesses per se, what's some of the strengths you guys have this year?
Like I said, I think our strength is our youth as well.
Okay.
You know, because they're gaining experience. You know, they're gaining valuable experience at the varsity level, and it's a process. And I've got to realize that, you know, that it is a process, that we have a young team. But I can tell you this, I wouldn't ask for another team. You know, our girls, they play hard. I can never question their effort, you know.
All right. Now, you also said in an article with the RO that you wanted to institute a slight cultural change with the program. What does that mean exactly?
I mean, being involved with the community, you know, getting the community to come out to support us, getting us to do things in the community, getting our girls more exposure, you know. We did a slam dunk club where local businesses in town did some sponsorships and stuff like that, and we got a board up in the gym with some of those names and stuff on them. So we want to get some more exposure for girls, for ladies basketball, because, you know, if you look, softball's been successful, volleyball's been successful. There's no reason why that, you know, the Lady Raider basketball program can't be successful.
Absolutely, right there with you. A couple more questions here, Coach. How did it feel to get that first career victory at Whiteville in the season opener? Go ahead and get it out of the way.
It felt good, you know, to kind of get the monkey off your back a little bit. You know, coming from coaching girls to boys, the one thing about our team is, you know, coaching boys, girls, I'm having to spend a lot of time with confidence, and I think that's another one of our weaknesses. You know, with girls, they can never be good enough, even though they are. As much as you tell them, you know, you got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in yourself. I think right now they lack the confidence, and you know, Coach McKeever and Coach Hauser and I, we're steadily trying to, you know, instill that confidence in them, Now, on the other hand, with boys, you know, they're LeBron James, you know, they're overconfident, you know. But with girls, I think it's an underconfident thing, you know, and you just have to give them that reassurance constantly. And I think we'll get there, but I think it's just that not being so sure about themselves right now, you know. And I've got several players that are, you know, they're very good ball players, but they're just not really sure of themselves, you know. You know, Lane Mossby, Haley Miller. Right. Those girls are great ball players, they are. But I just got to give them to believe in themselves.
And then final question, what's the ceiling for this team this season?
Last year, 3-11 in the conference. It won't be this year. You know, I really think that we could finish top 3. I really think that we can win the conference this year, with no doubt in my mind. Yeah. With the talent we have, with the experience that we're getting better every day. You know, we're getting better every day, but we still have to take it one game at a time. You know, take it one game at a time. Learn from each game. Learn from our wins. Learn from our losses. You know, take all that stuff together, and put the puzzle together. That's what we're trying to do. All
right. Sounds good. Well, Teddy Mosley, head coach from the Lady Raiders basketball team, we really appreciate you joining us. And again, we'll have to come have you back on the show after you guys have won that SAC championship.
I appreciate you having me. Thank
you. All right. Thanks again. And we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back to the Raider wrap-up, Deion Cranford is going to join the show. We're going to talk all things Raider sports, from swimming to bowling to basketball. So once again, Teddy, we appreciate it. We'll see you right back on the other side of the break.
Hi, this is Christina with Richmond County Hospice. I'm with Julie and Holly, and we're here to talk about how wonderful Hayden Construction was during our recent pipe bursting and flooding in our building.
In 10 to 15 minutes, they were here, and they were already starting to work, vacuuming up the water, trying to figure out where all the damage was, what all they needed to do.
They were so quick to get on the scene. They were here before I even arrived, and it was just reassuring to have them come in and take control.
We are so thankful that they were here to help us that day.
At Richmond Community College, we can prepare you for a high-skill, high-paying career in a variety of fields. From business to education, engineering, utilities, healthcare, criminal justice, information technology, and human services. At Richmond Community College, we can save you thousands of dollars on tuition through our university transfer programs that provide a seamless transition to universities and colleges throughout North Carolina. At Richmond Community College, we are always developing new courses and programs in response to the communities we serve. We offer day, evening, and online courses, and you can now complete 5 curriculum programs entirely online. At Richmond Community College, we believe in helping you prepare for a better life. Richmond Community College. Local college, big impact.
At Richmond County Hospice, we strive to provide high-quality care to our patients and their families. Whether it's the incredible hospitality at the Haven House or from the comfort of your own home, you can count on Hospice to be there for you. We also offer monthly grief support groups, and our chaplain will be there to hold your hand in prayer. Through our amazing staff and our volunteers, Hospice has made difficult times easier for our community. Call the number on your screen if you feel that you or your loved one may benefit from our services. Richmond County Hospice. Peace, comfort, dignity.
McNair Auto Sales is the place to buy your pre-owned car, truck, or van. To be the best, it takes big selection, friendly staff, and great pricing. We guarantee a no-hassle buying experience, and financing is available right on site. So come see us today. We're located at 1026 East Broad Avenue in Rockingham. And remember, with over 40 years of experience, you know McNair is the name you can trust.
And welcome back to the Ross Raider Wrap-Up. Dion Cranford joining the desk now. Dion, we appreciate it as usual. So as we mentioned, we want to hit all things Richmond Raiders sports here. So let's jump right into it. Now we had the Lady Raiders head coach Teddy Mosley on for the interview. Again, we appreciate him joining us. So with that being said, let's jump to the boys' side of the court. So the Raiders' latest game was on Monday. They actually lost 51-50 to the Raiders of Ronald Reagan. And it was on a last-second shot. So how difficult is it to lose a game on a shot like that, right there at the end?
Well, unfortunately, they've had to endure that quite a bit. As a matter of fact, their last 3 games, they've lost by 7 points or less. And in most of them, they were right there in it until the very end. A couple of free throws kind of separated them in a couple of those games. But, it's tough. They actually beat Reagan earlier in the year. So, for Reagan to come back and kind of beat Richmond on their home court, that probably was a tough loss. But, probably a much tougher loss was last Friday against Pinecrest.
Yeah.
Pinecrest is undefeated, and that game was tied at the end of the third quarter. Richmond just hung with them and just lost it right there at the end, just couldn't hold on.
Pinecrest is the team to chase, right, this year?
Probably in our conference, yeah.
Okay.
Now, Jack Britt won't surprise me either, so, you kind of have to watch out for them. But Pinecrest is probably the team to beat right now.
So the Raiders are now 1-5 on the season. And I don't want to say that it's time to necessarily start worrying, but it's time to start worrying a little bit, right?
Well, it is. The good news is they're only 2 games into their conference schedule, which in terms of playoff purposes, that's really the only thing that matters right now. And they're actually playing in a shootout tournament this week at Anson County, so they're going to have some more non-conference games to get in. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, additional good news to that is that, like I said, those games have been close. They're only a shot or 2 from being 5-1 instead of being 1-5.
Sure.
So, it's not like they're getting blown out. The potential's there. They've got the potential to win. They've got the potential to play with good teams because they have. They just got to kind of get over that little hump and fall into the win column, and they're totally capable of doing it.
So I was talking to Teddy about how we've seen the game of basketball speed up, beginning at the NBA level, then it moved to college, and asked him if it's reached the high school level, and he says it has. Have you seen that type of game from the boys' side as well?
Yeah, to a certain extent. It's funny because, and this will start a whole nother argument, and I'm not going to talk about it today, but the whole shot clock thing keeps coming up back and forth. Realistically, yes, the game has sped up, but it's really just to those teams that want to speed it up because a lot of teams really like to slow it down without the burden of that shot clock. They like to get a good look at the basket, pass it around the perimeter. Usually, if you can hang on to the ball long enough, you'll get the defense to break down and get an open look at some point. And like I said, without a shot clock burden you on that, they can continue to play that way. So yes, it's sped up a little bit, but that's usually by choice, not because they have to.
Right. So moving forward, Richmond is hopefully going to win its second game of the season. That next game is going to be Friday, December 21st, so tomorrow night. And they'll be playing Parkwood High School out of Monroe. Now, I'm not familiar with them at all. Do you know anything about this school?
Just very little. Richmond has competed in the Anson County Shootout the past few years. I'm kind of glad to see Parkwood in it because they have been bringing up schools like Chesterfield and bringing some other teams that aren't very good. As a matter of fact, Richmond won it last year easily. There just wasn't a lot of competition there. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure where Anson County is right now in terms of their season, but believe it or not, even with Richmond sitting 1-5, they've actually probably got a good chance of winning that tournament, depending on who they've got in there this time. I'm not looking at a very strong tournament
So
schedule.
you think it's more along the lines of Richmond's played a really tough schedule combined with being on a learning curve, perhaps?
Well, no, I mean, I think they're growing into it. I mean, once again, they're only under their second year head coach, and they're starting a lot of new phases. I mean, you got Kellen Hood starting as a freshman. And his brother Caleb, of course. We're going back to football. We're switching sports, aren't we? But
Well, he's on the team too.
yeah, but Roderick Newton's playing really well. He's a senior.
Yeah. And had 16 points in this game, by the way.
Oh, he had 16 in that one,
Yeah.
So he's been playing really well. Of course, Xavier Pettigrew, which we kind of missed a little bit last year, but he's playing really well. So I'm not looking at. I think what it is they're just growing. They're growing into those roles. They're gradually getting better. There is a lot of youth playing key players. I mean, Kellen's even started games this year as a freshman on the varsity level, which is actually impressive at Richmond. You don't see that too often in basketball. So I think they're going to be okay. It's just going to take some time, but the good news is they've got that time because they're only 2 games into the conference season. So
still plenty of ball left to play. So tip-off for Game 1 in the Holiday Tournament is scheduled for 5:30 p.m. tomorrow at Anson High School. There is a note here that Kyle put up. I believe it's Kyle that wrote this. If it was you, correct me. But the Raider junior varsity team traveled to Reagan on Monday, also losing 55-48. Despite the loss, sophomore Dalton Stroman recorded a double, scoring a team-high 27 points, adding 11 rebounds. So big game from Stroman.
Yeah, that's a big game. And again, they're going to have to start this on the JV team. Again, once again, 3 years ago, they were running that system. I forgot the name of it, but where they're basically rotate.
Everybody in every 5 minutes.
Run.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. They had a lot of success with it, but there's the older guys on this team are still kind of pulling out of that and starting to come under a new leadership and a new type of coaching under Coach Pettigrew. So I think they'll be all right. And the JVs, I believe, got swept as well. I think the varsity and JVs, both boys and girls, were swept by Reagan. So there's a lot of room to grow, but they'll get there.
So let's move from basketball to the mat. Let's talk about the Richmond Raider wrestling team. So first off, before we talk about their actual match here, I do want to bring up another story you can find on the RO. Is that their head coach, Nicholson, took the team to NC State to watch the Wolfpack take on Nebraska at the collegiate level. How important is it to do stuff like this with your program in order to make it better?
I think it's very important. I mean, it gets those young guys, especially those young guys, excited. He's got some young guys wrestling for him this year, and like you said, the middle schools were there too. And I'm still getting used to middle school wrestling. I'm not used to even seeing that as a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very good for the program because if you can start them early and build them up, obviously you can get the program better. Earl Nicholson does a great job with the wrestlers, and I don't even know how he sleeps because he's always doing something. He works with so many kids doing different things. So, but kudos to him on that trip because that was probably a great idea and probably get a lot of those guys motivated to play.
And he's been the Raider wrestling coach now for 20 years or something?
Oh, wow, like
yeah. Definitely since I was in high school. And then here's a story that you wrote. Again, correct me if this is not up to date, but juniors Joseph Nicholson, who is Earl's son, right? Mm-hmm. And Steven Morales both went 2-0 for the Richmond Senior High School wrestling team at Lumberton High School last Wednesday. So, but despite their efforts, the Raiders still only managed a 1-1 split in their second SAC meet of the season. So talk a little bit about those matchups.
Well, it's just a matter of the cream rising to the top. Pinecrest and Lumberton are probably just in a different league right now in wrestling. I mean, they're just both doing really well. Richmond, in their first conference meet, they had to play. They had to battle Pinecrest and Hoke. Mm-hmm. And of course they went 1-1 on that, and Pinecrest won by quite a bit. And then in the Hoke game, Richmond won by quite a bit. I think it was like 60-14 or something low like that. So they did well against Hoke. And then in the very next week, it was kind of the same scenario. They played one of the top teams and one of the bottom teams. They struggled against Lumberton, but beat Pernell Sweat pretty handedly. So they're kind of in that middle range right now. But there's a lot of potential, and there's some guys that are performing well. You mentioned Nicholson and Morales, but also we mentioned before we came on the air was Gallops, which I don't know if he was at Lumberton last week. I didn't see him, and I don't have him on the score sheet, so I'm going to assume he wasn't there. But also Skylar Standridge came in from the football team, and it was funny because in their first conference meet, he was unavailable because of football.
Right.
Then he goes to the tournament at Anson County and went 5-0. Standridge did. So it's really good to have him on there in that 220 spot.
Beat.
Yeah, he didn't skip a beat. And plus, that was the only the only weight class that we didn't have a wrestler. So they were actually having to forfeit that weight class. So to have him in that spot and have somebody in every weight class, it's going to, of course, improve their chances of winning a lot of these meets.
Yeah, for some reason, I always find it interesting when football season ends and you see players that are dual sports head back out into those other fields of athletics,
Well, we've always started late, I felt, in basketball for that reason, because we're just assuming that football is going to play late. But, a lot of times when our basketball season starts, there's schools that have 4 or 5 games already played in the book. So it does hurt and help in certain aspects.
All right. So according to you, after 2 weeks of conference action, Jack Britt is the only remaining undefeated team in conference play. The Bucks are currently 4-0, followed by Lumberton at 3-1, Pinecrest at 3-1, Richmond, Scotland, and 71st are tied for 4th with 2-2 records. Purnell Sweat and Hoke County both looking for their first wins. So as you mentioned, Lumberton and Pinecrest and Jack Britt, those are kind of the forerunners of the conference, right?
Yeah, and like I said, they're going to remain at the top. They're just a little bit better than everybody else. They're kind of at a different level right now. But I do see Richmond getting some big wins in some of those matches, maybe winning a few weight classes and kind of motivating them a little bit. I would like to see them at least solidly finish 4th or better, but solidly finish 4th. I meant because the other schools are probably at or below their level, so they should at least finish 4th below those 3 teams.
And then before we move on, the Raiders wrestling team are scheduled to return to the mat at the EB Memorial Clash at the Creek Tournament. It's going to be held at Mallard Creek High School today and tomorrow. And then Richmond will return to conference action next year, January 9th, when it hosts 71st and Jack Britt. So if you want to, I got to wait for some more SAC wrestling action until next year. So, but it'll be here before you know it. So let's move on to some other sports here. Let's hit bowling up, which is a relatively new sport here at Richmond, and one that, I know the RO covers it, but as far as anything like this would definitely be a first, right?
Yeah, and once again, it's another one of those sports that the conference kind of started to, and I don't know the whole story behind this, but I know when I was at the bowling match, I guess is what you call a bowling match.
Yeah, I don't know what you call it, bowling game.
When we were at the bowling match in Laurinburg last week, some of the Lumberton folks were saying, we need to build up a lot of attention and enthusiasm around bowling because it's not firmly in the books that it's something that the Athletic Association is going to keep.
Right.
And to our conference, the only 2 that I'm aware of that had bowling before this year were Jack Britt and Lumberton, and obviously they're excelling because of that. Lumberton has actually, if I'm not mistaken, won a couple of state titles in bowling. So my issue with bowling is I hate the Baker format. I just don't like it. It's hard, it makes it hard to follow, and it really, I think it takes away from a lot of the skills of some of your best bowlers. And if you're not familiar with Baker format, what that is each team has 5 bowlers. The first bowler bowl frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, frame 5. The 5 bowlers will bowl the first 5 frames and then start over with 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So every bowler is only bowling 2 frames a game.
Okay.
They'll play one school for 4 games, and then they'll play another school for 4 games. So they're playing 8 games. So if all 5 bowlers remain in for the entire thing, they bowl 16 whole frames, which isn't even 2 complete games. And then you throw into the top of that, they take extra bowlers, so they're switching out bowlers. So a lot of the bowlers aren't even doing that. So it
seems a little over convoluted.
Well, it's the way they do it in college, so I know that's why they're doing it in high school that way for the ones that actually want to continue that on into college and learn. And plus, it allows them to get more games in because you can bowl 4 games pretty quickly when every player's only bowling 2 frames. But the downside is it does keep a specific bowler who might be better from stringing strikes together. Where another teammate may be having a bad night and you're not allowed to kind of help them with your score. You just have to kind of sit. But it does make it a team sport. So, it does make a team sport, but it does take a lot of it takes a lot of the excitement out of it to me, but they're learning.
Yeah. So despite rolling their best series of the season, the boys dropped a closely contested match to Hoke County before rebounding to sweep Purnell. So led by senior Savannah Lampley in the anchor position with 10 marks on the day, the Lady Raiders went 2-0 against Hoke County and Purnell Sweat. So the Raiders and the Bucks entered the day with matching 134 pin averages. So let's see. The Bucks came out swinging. They connected 4 strikes from the 3rd through the 6th frames, resulting in a season-high 197 in their opening game.
And that's pretty good in a Baker's format. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then the Raiders were able to string together 3 strikes thanks to a strong finish by seniors Tyler Bass and anchor Evan Hudson to close some of the gap in total pins. Hoke took the first game 197 to 156. Now, when it says anchor, is that someone in the 5th position?
That's someone in the 5th position, and they call them that because in the 10th frame, they have the possibility of bowling extra. If should they strike or spare, they can get another turn. So they're the ones that usually can win a game for you if they're in that position.
And then the Raiders had little trouble taking down Purnell in the second match of the day. Richmond won 5-0, outscored the Rams 559 to 454. The Raiders took an early 62-pin lead. It's tough to come back from a 62 deficit, isn't it?
It is. And like I said, they play each team 4 games. So should it become a 2-2 split, which the Lady Raiders actually had, then they go to total pins to break the tie. That's the 5th point. So when you can take a 60-pin advantage like that, you kind of force the other team to beat you 3 times, and if they don't, you're probably going to win the series.
All right, and before we move on, Richmond is already back in action today at the Sandhills Bowling Center in Aberdeen. Those matches began at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Of course, you can stay locked to the Richmond Observer to find out all the details and the stats, probably from you, right?
Yeah, probably.
Let's see, what are we leaving out? Swim team, is that what we're missing here?
We're missing swimming.
All right, so let's hit the swimming team. And I believe this one was written by Kyle. Of course, by the way, just kudos to you and Kyle for really carrying the RO Sports Department, writing all these stories. But heading into Wednesday's 3rd SAC conference meet of the season, the Richmond Senior High School boys and girls swimming team shifted their game plans in the pool. So the Raiders, the boys finished in 5th place with 135 points, which is a season high. But a late disqualification for the Lady Raiders in the 200-yard freestyle relay kept them in 6th place with 92 points. So when it comes to making mistakes like that, just getting disqualified, how easy or how delicate is that system?
I mean, it's very delicate, and it's very, very simple things you can do to get yourself disqualified.
It seems that
there's
way.
stroke infractions. You're just not doing something right with your arms. You're in the water. You can't touch the bottom. You can't. You have to go in at a certain time, and there's all these different things that make it. And it's funny because last year, of course, was the first year of swimming in our conference. The only 2 swimming experience before that was Pinecrest and Jack Britt. But at the first meet last year, there were over 200 disqualifications.
Wow.
In the first meet with all the teams. So they've really had to do a lot of work on the format of the actual meets themselves in terms of what events they're going to have and how many they're going to let into those events. So to try to keep those, because I think Coach Way said that they didn't get done until about 11 o'clock at night that night because they were still trying to figure everything out. So you don't want the kids getting home at midnight on a school night. So they're really working on that. But they really spent a lot of time up to last week, I believe, working on individual performances, reducing those disqualifications, make sure they're doing everything correctly and swimming faster. And then Coach Way said they kind of switched to a more team approach last week. So.
Jack Britt High School's boys and girls team each took 1st place in the swim meet. Pinecrest High School's team took the 2nd place spot. One thing that wasn't working in the Raiders' favor was senior Natalie Davis was battling an illness, and she's been one of the better swimmers on the team, right? So that obviously didn't help.
She really has. I mean, she's an important part of that relay team and does really well in the 50 and 100-yard freestyle. She's usually one of the top, 4 or 5 finishers, which is kind of impressive considering how new this program is. So they did miss her a little bit.
And another thing that Coach Way has talked about being an issue is finding people to actually fill the program. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's going to continue to be a problem down the line? Or is it because they're swimming in the wintertime?
Yeah, I haven't figured that one out yet either because it's warm in that building, but you step out in the hallway and you're freezing. But I'll tell you this, they've got a lot of youth this year. They've got, if they can keep those kids in and keep them swimming, one of the biggest issues for Richmond right now is, you look at a school like Pinecrest, they actually have feeder programs for swimming. I mean, these kids are swimming in middle school, probably younger than that. So they've been swimming for years. So what Coach Way has to do is start with these, these 9th graders, 10th graders, get them a little bit better. Maybe a couple years they'll be competitive and bring in some more youth to do it. But I tell you, in all of Richmond's programs, it's the freshmen and sophomores that are like really standing out. So the good news is there are a lot of athletes, and the bad news is he only had one returning person on the guys team this year. So the boys team is pretty much new all around. So it's going to take some time.
And then finally, before we move on, the SAC swimming regular season will wrap up following the extended holiday break on Wednesday, January 9th. Richmond will team up with Pinecrest to host the meet, and that is scheduled for a 5:30 p.m. start. So just like with all the other sports, going to have to wait till the beginning of next year. And then finally, before we finish, this perhaps might be the last time we talk Raider football for a little bit. But it came out this week, the All-SAC team and the Raiders represented with 18 selections. So what do you make of this?
Well, I mean, that's not a huge surprise when you have a team that sweeps a conference and really kind of swept it with the authority that Richmond did this year. I mean, the Scotland game was probably the closest, and then it wasn't really that close. I mean, Richmond kind of ran away with the second half. So it's not surprising to see pretty much the Richmond Raider roster being the all-star team because I mean, that's just kind of how it played out.
So let me run through these names real quick. And, of course, you can find all of these, again, on the Richmond Observer. So we have sophomore wide receiver Jacoby Baldwin, junior defensive back Derek Behringer, junior running back Jaheim Covington, sophomore offensive lineman Jaleel Davis, senior linebacker Tavion Ellerby, junior offensive lineman Austin Hart, senior defensive end Antonio Isaac, junior defensive back DeMarcus Harrington, sophomore quarterback Caleb Hood, senior linebacker Jonathan Jones Jr., junior defensive back Xavion Lindsay, sophomore kicker Trevor Moss, senior defensive end Divine Nicholson, senior defensive end Rasheed Patrick, just goes on and on and on. Senior offensive lineman Jake Ransom, sophomore linebacker and Swiss Army knife, I call him CJ Tillman, senior wide receiver Bobby Terry, and another senior wide receiver in Jordan Walls. So a lot of players across all facets of the game, offense, defense, and special teams. That's why we had a successful year, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about that about every week. So, yeah.
And then one quick thing that we kind of had a small debate about. So Coach Teal ended up winning SAC Coach of the Year, and we had kind of floated out a little debate on our messenger board about who should have won SAC Coach of the Year. Should it have been Bailey at Scotland? Should it have been Metzger at Pinecrest? Or should it have been Teal? Now, I said if it's regular season, it goes to Teal. But then if you start opening up the playoffs, you have to at least consider those other guys, don't you?
Well, and I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't know when that's determined or voted on. I'm going to assume it's done at the end of the regular season simply because how fast they get it out after the last team is done playing. So, if you're looking at the regular season, hands down, Coach Teal deserves it. And he's definitely in the argument even overall. I felt like, Bailey took a 5-5 team to the state title game, but, and I know I'm going to get some flack from this from the Scotland fan, but it was kind of in a very weak playoff bracket. So, I mean, now I'll admit they shocked me against East Forsyth. Right. I thought they were going to have their hands full with East Forsyth, and they played them to the final second, so props to them. But I don't think, I mean, when you say they're playing Pine Forest in the third round, 71st in the fourth round, we saw those teams. We know they're not that good. So, I mean, to see those as the final two games for Scotland was a little bit kind of telling of how strong that playoff bracket was. But if you look at what Pinecrest did, and I know people around here have their issues with Pinecrest too, but they've never made it past the second round of the playoffs ever in school history, and they made it to the fourth round this year. But more importantly, they had to beat a really good Hoggard team on the way. Yeah. So, Metzger's definitely in that argument if you include the playoffs. Bailey's included that argument if you include the playoffs. I'm glad Coach Teal won it. But if you do include the playoffs, and here we go, but I kind of go this much in Metzger's favor just simply because of that finish, to take that program to that level and to beat a good team on the way.
And either way, there's obviously some solid coaching talent here in the SAC. So. Yes. But again, congratulations to Coach Teal on that award. Also, congratulations specifically to Caleb Hood and Jake Ransom. This was their second and third time, respectively, being on the All-SAC team. So Jake Ransom, his third year being on that team. Total of 48 players that were selected to the team. 2 more named as the top players of the year. That would be Purnell Sweat High School's Chandler Brayboy, who was a senior wide receiver listed on here, although he was literally a do-it-all kind of player for them. He was Offensive Player of the Year. And then Jack Brett High School's Eric Martinez, their senior linebacker, earned the Defensive Player of the Year award. So,
and just to throw this out there, Chandler Brayboy committed today. I forgot
Did he?
where. I wanted to look it up, and I apologize, but I saw where he committed to college today to play. But also an excellent baseball player. We see him on the baseball diamond.
We did. Yeah, he's just a phenomenal athlete. So again, if you want to see all of this, you can catch that on the richmondobserver.com. And before we go to, or finish up rather, as I mentioned, this might be the last time we talk about Raider football for a little bit. So any last thoughts?
No, I mean, I enjoyed the season. I know when they lose, it's kind of a deflating moment, but I think they had a great year. I think it showed a lot of improvement. I think they showed a lot of heart, and I think they're going to be even better next year.
I agree. The future is bright for the Richmond Raider football team. So, again, just because football season ending does not mean that we're done with your Richmond Raider coverage. Stick right here to the Ross Raider Wrap-Up each week. We'll have everything Raider sports. And once again, Dion, we really appreciate your joining us. I'm Matt Harrelson. We'll see you right back here next week on Thursday night for the Ross Raider Wrap-Up.